All right. I'd like to welcome Chris Rylands of Renaissance Orchards out in Ferndale, Washington. And I've been so excited for this conversation with Chris because, one, there's some amazing bottle labels, and we're going to be tasting this Ellis Bitter together with Chris and just talking about your history with cider supply, what you're doing in your orchards, and with all these like single varietal ciders, and then the big blend and the Perry, a lot of stuff, Chris. But let's first start with the room that you're sitting in with all those barrels, which just is absolutely stunning. You got your brand on there, you got your bottles to one side, the cans to the back, uh, and you're wearing kind of a nice little Hawaiian type of shirt. You know, the weather's warm and the scene is cool in Washington State. So this is your production room that we're looking at behind you.
Yes, correct. It is the area where I age some of the ciders, and they're mainly barrels of bourbon barrels. There's some French Calvados barrels and several Cabernet wine barrels. So we like to experiment with barrels, and yet stainless steel and glass is also used quite a bit when we don't want to bring in any of the organic flavors of the barrels and just stay with the actual cider flavors that develop on their own.
So you're doing a little bit of everything, and I also want to just say welcome to Cider Chat. I'm super stoked to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us too. That's great.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get into it. You have a long career in the cider community, but yet I don't think folks really know what you're doing or some of your past history. So let's go to your backstory from cider supply to the orchards, and bring us up to date here.
In the early 2000s, we had a surplus of North American apples in our orchard, about 60 trees. And it was largely planted for recreation. It's always pretty easy to put trees in the ground, and a whole nother story to take care of them later. We started experimenting with making cider and using the eating apples. And you know, I had no background in it. I was just, people say, just throw it in a container, a carboy, and a barrel, and add some yeast and let it go at it, and you'll have good cider and so on. And so in the early years, we had John of Gold, Fuji, Golden Delicious, Macintosh, McCoon, Gravenstein, Red Delicious, Yellow Transparent, and a few others. Um, and the outcome was battery acid cider,
No.
usually overly tart, bone dry, with high alcohol. And and family and friends, they look at you and taste it like, oh, this is really good, and but back behind the scenes, they probably didn't like it.
Mm.
So, but what changed it all for me and my wife was Melinda is my wife. I traveled to Montreal, Canada to visit some family, but I didn't bring any cider. So instead of bringing the normal cab wine to our dinner party, I went to purchase a few bottles of cider at the local bottle shop. And I asked for the best cider they had, and the salesperson said, "I've just, I have just the thing." So he presented me with a cider that was imported from Normandy, France, and I explained that I made cider out of the best tasting apples and the most popular apples in the U.S. And so it needed to be a good cider because then I could tell the family my cider was similar to what I brought to dinner. So I still remember the curious frown the salesperson made as he went, hmm. He then rotated the bottle and said that the French use bittersweet apples.
Mm.
The fresh apples taste bad, but make a perfect cider. I remember thinking, this is risky, especially for the price. How could this be? You know,
Mm.
good cider from bad tasting apples. This was counterintuitive for me, but I had to taste what he was talking about.
Mm.
So I picked up several bottles, and moreover, it was the only cider they had on the shelf. So the bottles were presentable and good. So, and before I left, he went on to say to the effect, remember, when you go home, good wine is not made with table grapes, and good cider is not made with table apples. I thanked him for his opinion and left. I wasn't sure if I was irritated or intrigued, but you know, anyhow. But at the dinner, the moment of truth, I opened the I opened and served the bottles, and I was ready to explain the similarities to my cider. Well, then I tasted the French cider. Uh, I was shocked at the smooth flavor, balanced profile compared to mine. Nothing even came close to the French cider out of
Mm.
all the batches I made, and even what was available in the US at the time. They all said, "Wow, this is great. Does yours taste like this?" And I said, "Pretty much." I turned beet red, sat down, and said, "No, no, not even close." I explained with my new information the apples I use are eating apples. The French use bittersweet apples and left things at that. So I
Mm.
survived ridicule. so,
Mm.
so I was very glad I didn't bring my battery acid.
Dear. Wow. Wow. Well,
So
the French will be happy to hear that who are
yeah,
listening out there. Wow.
the apples gave the cider a delightful full body, powerful apple
Hmm.
bouquet, perfect balance of sweetness, crisp acidity.
Hmm.
The mouthfeel was rich with a crisp and clean,
Mm.
sparkling, fresh taste. The finish was long lasting, three dimensional, and most notably ended with an awesome caramel flavor that I still remember this day. Had a light aroma of, now I understand to be the phenolics or polyphenols. Um, Eric Bordelais changed my cider expectations forever. Ever since then, I crave French style cider. So I will say
Classic.
that that wrecked me. so, but
Well, there's only one direction to go. It's up from here. So that must have really changed your whole planting in your orchard. What happened next?
yeah, well, I was sitting there that evening in Montreal, and I couldn't wait to get home and plant my French cider orchard. The
Mm.
plan was, as soon as we got home to Washington State, I would purchase a bunch of bittersweet apple trees from our nursery and plant them in our empty acreage. And 4 years, I could start making that excellent French cider.
Mhm. Yeah.
Unfortunately, very soon after coming home, this fantasy bubble was popped. I quickly found out that no one heard of bittersweet apples, and even the large nurseries had no idea. Some told me I was actually looking for bitter crab apples with a French name, and that's all. For cider, they kept referring to their apple books and catalogs, saying, "See, these are what we have," and it says they're all
Mhm.
multi-purpose apples, and they can be used for cider too. So buy these ones. And looking back, it was very confusing because I was thinking that cider in North America was the same as cider in Europe. I didn't realize or know that apple juice or cider in the U.S. was apple juice, and cider in the uh, in the UK and France was fermented apple juice. And so the books and whatnot, largely in the U.S., were making reference to fresh juice, and the nurseries were missing the fact that that was the case. So
Mhm.
once you fermented it, well, it's always a fight to deal with that acidity.
What year were we talking about here? Because you said like early 2000s. So just to give people a timeline.
Yeah, it was about mid. It was about the mid 2000s.
Okay.
Right
Yeah.
around there from my recollection.
Sounds about
Um,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I started doing the research. Yeah, in the mid 2000s, after work, we spent thousands of hours late into the evenings researching on every possible aspect of cider online and English cider, and the scope was just basically getting cultivar names and orcharding information and European cider making processes. And I soon discovered that everything I thought I knew about cider and cider making was limited and quite wrong. Thanks to Google, they had scanned thousands of old French and English books, reports, and documents, and some data back as far as the 1700s. Um, then the French and English cider apple names started appearing in highlighted text, which was saved us a ton of work. It was several months, maybe even a year into this researching. The whole time I didn't even know that Washington State University had a cider research station 28 miles away from us.
Wow. Like what do you attribute that to? Because that's kind of like a, palm to the forehead moment, realizing 20 minutes away. Wow.
Yeah.
Why is it disconnect? No communication
You know,
between the community?
I don't know. Well, there wasn't any cider companies in Bellingham or really hardly anywhere that I can even
Mhm.
remember.
Mhm.
And the ones that were in existence were largely working with dessert apples and eating apples and pot fruit. So I just figured I just had to focus on France and European stuff, and I totally skipped anything in the U.S., which was definitely a mistake. So yeah,
Mm.
I couldn't believe it, and then I was introduced to Dr. Carol Miles and her team, and what a great breath of fresh air that was, because they were evaluating the viability of organically growing European cider apples and perry pears in our maritime climate. That's exactly what I wanted to do, and they they had reports, they had names, they had bloom times, all this great information, and they're still available through their website. And if anyone's wanting to plant an orchard, I would say that's in the U.S. I mean, that's the first stop to go, because
Good tip.
they really covered it well. I know there's some universities on the East Coast for sure, but
Like Cornell. Cornell
yeah,
has a big program there too.
yeah, yeah,
For sure.
exactly.
But
So
Washington State's happening. Yeah. Yeah. So Chris, when did you become a commercial cidery? When did that take place?
It was probably about 10 years ago, I would say.
Hmm.
Um, it was about that. We changed, we were doing cider before, but it was just largely testing and evaluation and just that kind of thing. It was Cider Supply in the beginning. We are still cidersupply.com, but I named it Renaissance Orchards in the spirit of a revival of cider apples,
Very
because we
good.
were totally focused on reviving the cider apples, here in the U.S. Even though there's not a huge history of it, um, we were going to revive it, do our best.
So
So
so I'm just trying to get a timeline here. So early 2000s, you had an orchard, then you started, discovering the other options that are going on in the rest of the world.
mhm.
Then you started Cider Supply as a way to connect the community. Like, what was the original idea behind that? And let's just tell folks what Cider Supply is, because I know
Yeah,
I picked up a Keeving kit from you a
yeah,
number of years ago.
yeah. Well, as time went on, and I learned about how to keeve cider, there was the PME enzyme, pectin methylesterase, and in some of the good cider books of the time that they were mentioning that, and but it was impossible to get, and I really tried hard to get it. And the only thing I could do was to find enzymes in several kilo amounts,
Mhm.
and the manufacturer would not sell it anything less than that. And so I said, well, okay.
Mm.
So I said maybe I should try to pedal the excess off, and that's basically what we did. Was we bought it in bulk and then created this whole idea of generating keeving kits with a amount of PME and then calcium chloride, of the highest quality, and then instructions on how to
Mhm.
keep cider. And at that time, I was starting to get for several years, I had a lot of bitter sweets coming on, and I could actually start keeving and experimenting. So, but I had to basically unload the excess because it is a perishable. It loses approximately, at least this stuff, the powder would lose 20% of its viability per year. We opened up the whole cidersupply.com and started selling the keeving kits. And basically, people could email us and then say, you know, how much cider they were trying to keeve, and we would tailor the kit for them. So it was all pre-measured and pre-mixed. So literally, as long as they had their apples or whatever apples they wanted to use and try with, there was not a whole lot of lab work at their end as far as that goes. So, and we sold about 8 years we were selling around the world. There was
Mm.
no other place in the U.S. that you could get it, and in England you couldn't either. But there was they had the same problem, was you had to buy a whole bunch amount, and
Mm.
people just weren't. So sold thousands of kits all the way to Eastern Europe, to
Mm.
Northern Europe. It's funny. The only place that never bought one kit was France. I never, out of all those years, never one single Keeving kit.
They don't need it. They don't need it. I mean, they have it perfected, no
I know.
doubt.
So I just always found that to be funny. But most
Uh,
of the sales went through to the East Coast, and England and the UK area, and a lot went over to Northern Europe and over in the Baltic states there. In the meantime, now Vigo they had started their own Keeving kit, and that kind of allowed the English or the people in the UK to buy enzymes there. The manufacturer I was getting it from ended up quitting making it in the powdered form, and it was then in the liquid form they would only offer it, and you had to buy basically a 5 gallon, it's super concentrated 5 gallon container, and it was about
wow.
$1,000 or something like that. So I said, no, that's it.
I was wondering why you stopped doing it. It's kind of amazing that you sent it out to so many places all over the map, and yet Keeving is, really only recently, at least it feels for me, in the US being understood. And we don't see that many makers doing a keeved cider commercially in the US. I think I maybe have seen one or two. Do you have
Yeah.
any thoughts on that? Why that is like that?
Well, I did get a lot of. I think a lot of it was attributed to meta search names, and just the name Cider Supply. Was
Okay.
kind of indicative of what we were doing, and I would get all kinds of questions about it, and people would read on, and largely, I think a lot of people tried it with their culinary apples and eating apples, and
Mhm.
um, with mixed results, to say the least. You really do need to have bittersweet apples. Even the bitter sharp apples do not do well for
Do
most.
you have like a short explanation to what a keep cider is?
Well, the purpose of keeving is to remove yeast supporting nutrients from your juice, so wild yeast will run out of nutrients and fermentation stops before all sugar is consumed. What remains is a natural semi sweet cider with great mouthfeel, fragrance, superb flavors, and just enough alcohol to prevent spoilage.
And so folks who drink a Keef cider, the classic is like a Keef cider from France or the UK, and you have like that residual sweetness that
Mhm.
is not because somebody's adding more sugar or some other kind of adjunct to it. It's just a pure juice. It was a stop fermentation in many ways. It just lends a beautiful cider and often low in alcohol too,
Yeah,
low
yeah,
alcohol by volume.
yeah. I've most of all the Keef ciders I've done, they've all been between 3.5 to some got up to 5%, but
Mhm.
that's pretty much it. But I've talked to people that say, well, you can do multiple rackings of the bittersweet juice, and yeah, you can get a lot of, without keeving, you can get a lot of similar flavors, but there is just there is just this extra component in the body and mouthfeel of a real keef cider that it's actually sat on the lees a little bit before it cap floated to the top. I've had some ciders sit a month, cap decided to rise. So those were definitely had unique flavors associated with
Mhm.
that extra lag time.
And you do sell a Keef cider, so you're one of the few
Yes. Yeah.
makers out there. There it
Yeah.
is in
I've only
750.
got a couple of bottles left.
Mhm. I think it would blow people's minds away when they start tasting Keef cider. For me, as someone who leads tours to France, it's really nice to be able to have ciders on hand that are low ABV because we're starting to drink kind of early in the morning, and
Mhm.
I could drink a whole bottle of that
Yeah.
on my own, and sometimes I do.
I recently got back from a trip to Paris and traveled around Normandy a little bit, and it was really interesting that how cheap or economical the Keef cider was over there. I mean,
Mhm.
it was everywhere in the shops, but mostly served with crepes and in the breakfast and cake shops and bread places. It wasn't at least the places we traveled. Definitely, it was the staple for breakfast. And before drinking before noon, something that's
Why not with a Keef cider? Why not?
yeah.
Are you selling other products at
Yes,
Renaissance?
initially, I mean, in my worldly plans, you can make God laugh by telling him your plans. I thought I would just sell Keef cider and it was going to be great, but a lot of the consumers, um, they like it, you know, but in the U.S. the price point is a bit high. Consumer, at least from my experience in this area, they want flavored ciders. They want, and I remember one time you had mentioned if you really want to be a cider connoisseur, look at the back and anything that says 100% cider apples, put it to the left, and anything that has flavors, put it to the right, and
Mhm.
then focus on the 100% cider,
Yeah.
and you're gonna then learn about cider, and taste that.
Mhm.
We live by a college town and have a lot of the college kids wanting mango, pineapple, maple, vanilla, all these flavors. So I've actually started producing those, but using bittersweet. I know a lot of people would
Wow.
just like, my gosh, you're wasting bittersweet doing that, but it adds a different component or layer to the flavor
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
that barrel aging doesn't. Um,
Right.
so, but
Uh,
so we've got the flavored series and then the pure series, which is the peri peri peri, and then the big blend cider, which is um,
Mhm. Yeah,
you
right
know
here.
when when we planted the orchard, we had learned about grafting. That was the only way for us to attain all the cultivars we have, and at one time we had 3,000 trees and about 305 different cider cultivars. And we got the scion wood basically from collectors around the country and the USDA and several other places that have a genetic repository. And then we grafted those on. But my plan was to thin them out and just pick maybe 10 or 15 of the good cider trees that were strong and not fickle. Well, this climate, at least here, everything, all the apples grew well. I mean, they all
Fantastic.
grew very, very, very well. And
Wow.
as a result, I said, well, okay, well, we're going to start selling scion wood. And so on
Mm.
renaissanceorchards.com, we've got the scion wood page, and that we've been selling scion wood around the country for about about 8 or 9 years now. Um, but in the interim, we've lost probably a lot of the trees. Still have most of the cultivars, but lost a lot of trees to deer, mechanical, you know failures, tractors, people speeding, uh, irrigation that didn't work the way it should. So, but we'll go back with single blocks, so um, there'll be less of the orchard taster, so to speak.
What do you mean by single blocks?
Oh, like, well, right now, we've got one row that has probably 30 different row of 600 feet long that has
Okay.
30 different kinds of cider apples
Mhm.
growing. It's pretty ugly.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so a single block would give us the ability to make,
One variety. One
yeah,
variety. Okay.
yeah.
Got it.
But yeah, the big blend is basically quote Renaissance orchards because it is 100% all the orchard
Big blend.
apples that I get every year.
Super
So.
cool. Super cool. So, and just to give us an idea of the orchard itself, and you're in Ferndale, which is right. pretty close to Bellingham, which
Yes.
is near the border of Canada. So if you're looking
Yeah.
at Washington State,
Hmm.
you have the Olympic Peninsula a little bit more to the west of you, and
Yes.
then you're pretty close to British Columbia.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're actually farther north than Vancouver Island.
All right. Well, that
It
and
is
yeah.
it is really bizarre, but good part is that we're on the same longitude or latitude line as Normandy, France,
Hmm.
and out of most places, this area, the north coast or the maritime Pacific Northwest has got a perfect climate for growing the French bittersweet and the English bittersweet apples because we get cold winters, but the Puget Sound and the coast keeps the area fairly warm in the winter, so we don't get the drastic freezing Arctic blasts like they do in the Midwest and northern part of the Northeast.
Yeah.
So then in the summer, it's kept cooler by the ocean also, and we've got the Cascade Range and the Olympic Mountains, which create a kind of a really nice
Mhm.
microclimate.
Well, what's your elevation?
Here we're at about 500 feet above sea level.
Okay. And the big mountain that's really close by to Bellingham is
Mount Baker, yeah,
Mount Baker. Yeah, which
yeah.
I have climbed. Yeah,
Oh, you've
that's
climbed it. Oh,
yeah,
wow,
yeah. That's a 16,000, isn't that? If
that's
I
quite
recall
a
correctly.
feat.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
good for you.
Got
That's
lowered into a crevasse on that mountain. That was a trip.
wow,
Yeah, yeah,
wow.
yeah. Used to do a lot of that stuff. Shall we talk about this amazing? And I'm going to put this little photo up here, and folks who aren't watching this live will be able to see this. These incredible single varietal ciders. Uh, there are 17 bottles, and off on the right hand side is the Perry. But each photo is of that particular apple. I believe it was probably taken in your orchard, right?
Yes.
Right there. And the labels, I mean, this is like collector item stuff. It's like a library that I have never seen the likes of before on a cider bottle. And people talk about what to have on a label, and you have like just blown me out of the ballpark here because the photos are gorgeous. And then you have post fermentation flavor graph, and you're talking about tannins, aromatics, acidity, astringency, sweetness, and phenolics, all on that for each and every single variety. It just, holy smokes, Chris. I mean, wow. I mean, like what I have a feeling like, do you have a science background? Is this kind of your like other side thing? Should we kind of like
Yeah.
that? Like, what
Well,
do you do?
my paying job is a technical writer.
There you go, man.
So
That makes so much
I'm a
sense.
yeah. So that's there's some background there. Well, thank you for your kind comments. That's really neat to hear. It was one season I was thinking, over the years of selling scion wood online and and the different cider apples, and then doing the research, I found there was a huge disconnect between what people were saying. Okay, well, if I get this apple, whether it's Dabonet or Phil Barrel or Ellis Bitter or whatever, I read it in the book and it says what it tastes like, but I don't know what that tastes like. And then, so after I
Mhm.
started experimenting during the keeving process, my keeving research, I would do different blends and things, and some of these I did by themselves. And I said, this tastes nothing like what the textbooks say.
Mhm.
And some of it is because some cultivars are not true to type, because over the years become, I think Tremlett's bitter is one of them. It's a bitter sharp in the U.S. and a bittersweet in England. So there's ones that are missed there, but this is all done with the same yeast. They were all treated equally. There was no sugars added, no anything like that, and they all
Mhm.
fermented out to completion. I so there may be a little bit of change because maybe to get a better flavor, you would have to let it age longer. So it's kind of a ballpark thing. I said, okay, well, what are the basic things that I've noticed people ask about? One is the tannins, two is residual sweetness,
Mm-hmm.
three is acidity, the polyphenols, and that magic can be magic and it can be a curse. And all of these things. I said, well, why don't I just do a flavor set of all of these apples and we'll see how it turns out, and then graph it, and I kind of discovered that this residual flavor, the final flavor, um, did not have anything to do with the flavor of the apple. That's right off the bat. I mean, you can take a bite of a bittersweet and you can tell, yeah, this is a full bittersweet, or this is a mild bittersweet. This is a bitter sharp, and so on. But extrapolating that information to a finished cider profile is, for me, I've never been able to do it. And it changes from year to year because the compounds swing from year to year. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so with that in mind, I still said, well, we'll just do this and do a one run, and see how these do a comparison contrast. So people have the idea, it's like, okay, well, this is what a cider tastes like when there's not enough acid in it. This is, people say, oh, I'd love to buy the whole thing. It's like, well, do you know what you're buying? Because most of them are not very good tasting, because most of them are blenders. You need
Mm-hmm.
to have a good cider. You take some Dabonet and you blend it with a acidic variety, and then, you get some, a balanced cider that way. So it's more in the sense to say, the graph at the bottom is say, okay, well, this is what's predominant in this cider.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is to have something in the middle. you know yeah, exactly. There's like a little red line, and typically ciders want to be in the good zone. But you can kind of see that they can taste it and say, okay, the astringency is really low on this one and the tannins are pretty high, so what does that actually taste like? So that that was the approach. And I gave a picture of the apples and some history about you know that apple cultivar. So and yeah.
Are folks purchasing these as a set? Do you sell them as a set? Because this seems like such a great opportunity for education for commercial makers, clubs, the
Mhm.
whole gamut. I mean, wow.
Yeah, usually I we sell the case. I think it's 16 or 16. I don't include the Perry. Actually, a lot of cider makers buy them. When we go do cider conventions and things, and
Hmm.
I'll have them on the side, and cider makers and cider companies say, "Hey, do you have that special case you have? We want to bring
Hmm.
that home and get our team together and do some chatting." So
Yeah.
um, and that's pretty much where it goes. I've have have had not good luck with the average customer tasting them. They're like, I don't get it. Why it tastes? Some of these are, I don't like it, and it's
Yeah.
like, why are you bottling it? It's like, well, it's a tool. These are
It's a tool.
these are all.
Yes,
This is your spice cabinet, so to speak.
exactly.
Take a
Yeah.
teaspoon of cinnamon, you're going to be in trouble.
And there's like different colors. I mean, they're all kind
Yeah.
of, well, for the most part, let me put a piece of paper up in front of that.
Mhm.
They're mainly all this color. And if we go back to this photo again,
Mhm.
you could see like there's some variation in the color there, which is also telling too.
Yeah.
Um, I want to drink all these and then I want to like refill them and then hang them on my shelf like a little library.
Some
Um,
people do that actually.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna be one of those. I want to, ask you about, like, on the top here,
Mhm.
there's different numbers and or letters.
Yeah.
What is that about?
So I got done fermenting all of the different containers of the different cultivars. I I would take Dabonet, and then I would fill X number of bottles, and then I would put the ink letter on top of it, because after they were finished and put in the bottle, I did a yeast pasteurization.
Okay.
So brought it up and so to kill off any potential
Mhm.
residual yeast,
Mhm.
and labels would come off in the pasteurizer. So,
Mhm.
and we weren't going to do 18 different pasteurization batches, so we basically had 18 different cultivars in the same bottles, but you couldn't tell them apart without the letter on top.
There
So
you
that's
go.
why it exists.
Yeah, yeah, total like Rubik's square thing.
Yeah.
I just I mean, this label is so incredible. So it says apple type, and it explains that in terms like a bittersweet, and then also Chris has on here for this one. This is the Ellis Bitter. It says a blender and Keevers, and then it says the origin, in this case, England and Somerset,
Hmm.
and the year 1800s, and then he has written here use as a blender and as a single varietal cider, and then also for French style cider because it's low acidity and high pectin levels allows for keeving. And then there's some notes too on the bottom, particular to this bottle here, that it's a still cider and was fermented in glass using the yeast here, Lavalin, which is a D47. I'm sure a lot of listeners out there are familiar with that,
Yep.
and at the temperature too. I mean, OMG. This is like a cider maker's handbook on a label. And then it says how long it was aged, 6 months, and then aged on a secondary lees for 12 months.
Mhm.
Wow. I mean, man, you
Thank you.
win the award for labels of all labels. I mean, I,
Thank you.
I love your big blend.
Thank
I
you.
have the Perry here too. This is really beautiful
Thank
label. Let
you.
me bring that in. Beautiful, beautiful label, right?
Thank you very much.
But this is like Library of Congress type of stuff because
Yeah.
we don't see this anywhere else. And what an opportunity. People talk about that like, well, make a single varietal. So when you initially did this, was this in like 5 gallon, or and now what do you do? How big of batches are you doing this in?
Well, I have not resumed it because it was ter- terrifically labor intensive.
Yeah, I'm gonna
It was,
say.
I
I
mean,
mean,
and but there was about 50 gallons of each.
okay.
So it was a lot, and I sold a lot of them.
There's
They,
still some available, so if
oh
people
yes,
contact,
yeah,
okay, good. All right.
so, yeah,
I I
and
I hope people do come knocking on your door because wow.
yeah. Well, they can. I do have them listed on Vino Shipper, but we also can ship in Washington State too.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but we're not really set up to ship out to other states because
Okay.
everybody needs their own license, and I just they can't.
Yeah,
It'd be
yeah, I
tens
get
of thousands of dollars to get to everybody. So, but
mhm,
Washington State, is we can do it in our own state. But
mhm.
otherwise, you can buy them one singles at Vino Shipper. So
Okay, there you go. Well, I highly encourage listeners out there in Ciderville to check out these bottles because this is really like uh, these are I get a lot of bottles. I'm holding on to these bottles.
thank you very
I'm
much.
like thinking, where can I set up my shelf? I have like make a shelf just for it
Thank
because,
you.
man, it's just so cool. I just, right there, right there. And when you're thinking about blends and you're overwhelmed, and we're constantly seeing these kinds of questions online. What should I be blending? What apples should I be planting? And it's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. It's like, well, you know what? Try some of these ciders
Mhm.
and then decide what trees you want to plant. That kind of like seems
Precisely.
like a really good idea to go that route.
Thank you. And that's the goal. And the other goal is also to all the other cider makers out there. It's your turn. I did the first run, so it'd be great to have some other cider makers around the country, um, whether it's 5 or 10 or 3 or 4,
Mhm.
do their own and maybe follow a similar pattern of information. So, because it is neat to find out if the same kind of apples have the same kind of flavor profiles if they're grown in New York,
Mhm.
California, or so because
Sure.
it is. I've discovered that there is definite differences in tannins and sugar levels and acidity based on where you're growing the same apple.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these textbooks will say, "Oh, it's hard and fast rule. It's like this," but there is variations, and within each region, the variations do fluctuate. So terroir is important, but it's not as important as in wine grapes because wine grapes, the variation is much tighter. But with apples, the fluctuation swings greatly.
So, am I hearing you correctly? It does matter the terroir with apples or not?
Well,
That's
yeah,
what you said there.
it yeah, it does because if you're going to be growing cider apples, especially the bitter sweets, um, you're gonna want something very similar to a maritime climate. Um, you know, because number one, most of them were developed in that climate, and a lot of the issues through several hundred years or
Mhm.
more were bred out of them. So, if you're going to plant some of these bitter sweets in humid areas like on the west coast, you're going to run into trouble with them rotting on the tree because they're
Mm,
late season and they've been subject to humidity
mhm.
far too long. You
Yeah.
know, so but even if you got them to grow, um, what you read in a book, you're going to have probably a different flavor profile um, than I have here. The most important thing I would say if people want to plant cider apples is try to plant a whole bunch, learn grafting, plant a whole bunch because grafting's cheap, and as long as you have one or two ones that have tannins in them, that's going to get you a long ways into making a good
Mhm.
balanced cider that's
Mhm.
similar to the European cider.
Mhm. Mhm. Cool. Well, shall we drink a little bit of cider? Because I'm feeling kind of thirsty.
That's
A little bit later on a Friday afternoon for me, but I know you're a cider maker, and it's
right.
5 o'clock somewhere. So shall we try the Ellis first, or go for the big blend? What would you recommend that we're going to be
I would
trying
say
to?
I would say we'll try the Ellis
Okay,
bitter,
all right, okay.
and I
Let's-
have my handy dandy press then press can opener.
Nice, right? Our friends at Press Then Press, Story and Eric. Okay, here we go. So again, these are all still ciders that you have bottled here. So look at that color, just like nice,
Mm-hmm.
um, not straw, but it's an amber, nice light amber.
Thank you. So be interested to see what you think.
That's a great single varietal cider.
Thank you.
I mean, straight up, it does make a great single varietal cider. The Ellis, you have some residual sweetness there,
Mm-hmm.
um, full bodied, the tannin, very, very drinkable, delightful.
Mm-hmm. It could use a little more acidity. I find it a little bit flat on that end, but that's
No,
just.
I like a lower acidity in my cider, so maybe I'm not always a good judge of that, but
Mm-hmm. I find it a little watery. Uh, that's just my opinion, though.
well,
Keep
yeah,
the
I
customer
mean,
away from the cider maker.
yeah, right, right. Well, I mean, it has some body with a little bit of the tannin. So yeah, it could have more for sure,
Yeah.
but I'm approaching it from I'm drinking this one apple,
Mm-hmm.
and in that way, I'm finding it absolutely delightful. If
Thank
I'm
you.
going for a blend, I think I'm going to be looking for a little bit something different there,
Mm-hmm.
but it tastes a little bit kind of like a baked apple.
Okay.
Get a little bit of baked apple on it. One's palate has to kind of like adjust to the taste.
Mm-hmm.
Have that nice drying there. I think because it's almost like a really rich, sweet cider in a way,
Hmm.
that I'm not sure if I would call this sessionable like that. And that's where I think you're talking about more of that brightness with the acidity would come
Yeah.
in to
Hmm.
make it more sessionable. But how cool just to taste a straight up Ellis bitter. That, I mean, that is what's neat. You get, okay, well, I want that flavor here, and now I'm going to next try something else. I mean, what have you learned, like with the Ellis bitter? What do you like to blend with that?
Well, I do blend some acidity with it.
Hmm.
I'll put some Ashmead's kernel in there.
Hmm.
Um, but typically, you know, we got a lot of single and multiple trees of 5 or 6, and if I get a heavy load of frequent one year,
Mm.
then I'll say, okay, what can I balance with that has acidity. So it's more on what I have available to play with rather than
Hmm.
actual targeted
Hmm.
plant.
No, I'm curious about the yeast too,
Hmm.
because that's going to lend a lot to this. So you're using the D47, the Lavalin. Why that particular yeast?
It was easier to die off,
Mm.
basically.
Yeah,
Wasn't like champagne yeast. I didn't want to
try it
uh,
out.
dry it out like a champagne. I
Yeah.
wanted to keep more of the residual flavors and
Hmm.
try to keep the alcohol levels lower, because, of course, as the alcohol levels increase, you lose flavor and all kinds of things. So,
Yeah. So this is 2.2% alcohol by volume,
yeah,
which is, like ciderkin, basically.
yeah.
And that's why I'm kind of thinking of it, this it's sweet, and it does taste a little bit like some of the local fresh pressed apple juice before
Hmm.
it's even
Yeah.
fermented. It's a nice, um I like a set marker to say, okay, I have this, and now where do I want to take it? Because that's really what you're looking for, a journey in the glass.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's not something that's like, oh, I'm going to savor this for hours type of cider
Mhm.
right now, but it's like, man, where can I go with this?
I
And
think I think that back in the day, since the water was so bad, that this is something that our ancestors would have been given the babies and things, for
yeah,
nutrients, you know,
absolutely.
and very low in alcohol. And
Hmm. So low in alcohol, and I just want to like see how it adjusts with your graph. So the graph here, it's saying that's high on the tannin. Uh,
Mhm.
you know, it could maybe go up a little bit higher. Some apples will, but what I like about this is that it really gives you a sense of the tannin
Mhm.
and that drying, and what that sensation should be. So for somebody who's like studying cider or trying to learn about apples, so drinking this Ellis bitter is a great place to begin. It's like, okay, well, it's really, you know, pretty darn good tannins, but the aromatics, super low.
Yeah, exactly.
Super low. You're not getting anything. And
Yep.
then we look at acidity. Chris has already said it's super low on the acidity. Astringency, yep. It's not like a tannin bomb or
No.
anything, but I'm getting that on the roof of my mouth.
Mhm.
And then sweetness is higher, and you could taste that right out the door.
Mhm.
And then the phenolics. Let's talk about phenolics. Can you explain to listeners phenolics as you see it?
That's something I've always struggled with, trying to explain what the polyphenols and the phenolics, how they present themselves in the cider. I mean, I like to say, well, tannins are, the bitterness, of something. The astringency is the drying of the tongue. The acidity is the freshness, crispness. Um, the sweetness, of course, is the residual sugar, but the aromatics and flavor of the polyphenols, and the tannins is it's almost like it's kind of an aromatic. It gets you in the back of the sinuses a little bit.
Hmm. Hmm.
Kind
Hmm.
of gives you an appley flavor, but
Hmm.
yeah, that's one thing I've been at a loss. I'm sure some of the other cider makers out there will come on and say, just say this. But I just,
How do you use this chart in terms of your blending with the phenolics? When it was important enough for you to have it on here. So I'm kind of wondering, how you were using that. And you have it below good. It's just above like low, a
Well,
little bit higher than low. Yeah.
the gold standard for me was the Keep cider.
Ah, okay.
So on that graph, there's a little red box, the little dotted line. If all of the compounds are in that range, um, personally, I think that's really close to a French style cider. And but it's also I find
Mm,
has been in other cider blends I've done and did taste tests. What makes most people the happiest? They're
mm,
like nothing really stands out too excessive,
mm,
and nothing shows itself as vacant. Ciders will give you the tannins up front. Some will be in the back. Some tannins are hard. Some are
mm-hmm,
soft.
mm-hmm.
And the polyphenol component just kind of is adds and accentuates certain aspects of the flavor profile.
Yeah, I love it because the graph like really varies for each of the different varieties that you have bottled here. So I can't wait for myself to kind of get into it and start checking it out. Let's move on to your other cider here. This one right here, the Big Blend. This is the 2019,
Yes.
and as you said, it's of all your it's your orchard in
Yeah.
a glass, right? Is that
Yeah.
what we're looking at here?
Yeah. This one contains 190 different types of French and English cider apples, and a couple of
190.
Irish apples and things. And it's just it is what it is. So
Is this like your flagship in a way? Would
pretty
you
much
say?
that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, this is in old England and France, the ermine, the little symbols were a statement of purity. So I said, well, what the heck, I'll add that in there, and the red apple is well, the two lions is off the flag from Normandy. Um,
I was
and
wondering about that. Yeah.
I said, well, I'm growing French apples here. Let's find a logo. And I said, oh, two lions are cool. And oh, well, a red apple with two lions. It's French cider apples. So, and went with that. So,
I'm going to open this can here. I always get scared opening near my equipment, but here we go.
yeah. Cheers.
Cheers, Chris.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
beautiful. And I'm going to let it just kind of. I find if I drink it too quickly when it's still
Mm-hmm.
settling in the glass, because it's kind of popping right out of the glass. So this is one that if we're going to look at the graft
Mm-hmm.
aroma is right there,
Mm-hmm.
really coming out.
Yeah, this one would have had. It's got all the compounds very close.
Wow. I have to just let my mouth settle into that. I'm thinking 190 apples,
Yeah.
100. Take one down, you pass it around. My goodness. So you can see a little bit of bubbles coming on. I'm not sure if you could see that, but there is nice carbonation here. The clarity is beautiful. It's the Ellis Bitter, where that was more amber. This is more of a gold, much more golden color.
Mm-hmm.
The nose is the bouquet. I would say appley, that's so like lame, but it feels like there's a lot going on in the bouquet. Very floral.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Not super tannic,
Mm-hmm.
at all. So you have the acidity is
Mm-hmm.
really well pronounced. So it's really carrying you in the glass. Still getting a little bit of that kind of like baked apple in the background, just very lightly, kind of caramelized,
Mm-hmm.
not buttery. Full mouth, all the way around. Full mouth experience. So you're getting it in the front, all the way to the back,
Mm-hmm.
drawing down, and that is really what I look for in a cider. Something that's just not one dimensional. This is totally 3-dimensional
Yeah.
cider.
Yeah.
And this is a cider that I want to sit down with for a while and just
Thank you.
see how it changes it in the
Mhm.
glass, and as it warms up. Mine's not really, I didn't like deep chill. It's just lightly chilled.
Hmm.
I can imagine this with food or just having it alone. It would go either way. It does feel like I've had like an apple in my mouth, not a tart apple, just a really baseline kind of, nice acid in the apple. Yeah, lovely. I'll have nice breath from drinking this cider, which is also a plus too.
Excellent.
Yeah, yeah, well done. Really lovely.
Thank
Wow.
you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, a lot of complexity here. And this is a 6.5%. Is that what I'm
Yes.
recalling correctly?
If
Yeah,
I remember correctly, yes, it
yeah.
is.
And you're classifying this as semi-sweet.
Yeah.
So, but because of the tannin structure there, you have a little bit of that to what I like what you're doing here is for folks who don't maybe normally are familiar with cider, they could have this and say, wow, there's some complexity here that I didn't expect. Oh, but I have a little bit of that sweetness too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it pulls the mass market, but at
Hmm.
the same time, for cider drinkers like you and I, we're like, oh man, this is totally drinkable, very pleasing. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. How about the Perry? Let's talk about what you're doing with pears and this particular Perry pear is was on a barrel age, wasn't it? Calvados, French
Yes.
Calvados.
Yeah. This was has got a good amount of the polyphenols that I mentioned. About 2 cases left.
Oh, okay, good. And do you know what kind of Perry pears you have?
Yeah, there's let's see, right off the top with yellow hufcap, butt pear, Romanian Perry pear, red pear, Winnell's Longden, Barnett, gin pear, Gelb Mostler.
Wow, all these wonderful names for
Yeah,
pears. There's like nothing like a pear name
yeah,
for the Perry pear.
and then also a conference pear, which was one that
Mm.
was very famous in the late last couple centuries as being the best all-around pear in every way, according to some of the old reports written in the 1800s.
Mhm,
So I had
mhm.
to plant one of those. And it's also including one of the earliest ripening pears I've ever encountered. It ripens in June. It's called Bella di Giorno. And if you want early pears, they're at the end of June.
Wow,
And
how big are those pears?
they're about 2.5, 3 inches tall
No
at
kidding.
best, and they're very thin skinned. They ripen and drop immediately,
Wow.
but they are super flavorful and they're not gritty. And they're beautiful pears. I mean, beautiful little things. They're yellow with a little bit of a reddish blush on them with some
Wow.
spots and
Are those Perry pears?
No, I mean they're eating pears, but
Okay,
those I add some of those sometimes. But
fantastic.
the
Wow.
trick, yeah,
You
the
get
trick,
to like offer something really early. That's wonderful.
yeah,
One thing, I'm really pleased to meet the person behind Cider Supply because I
thank
knew that you were doing quite a deed there trying to get folks turned on to Keeved cider,
you.
something that is still coming down the pike. And what you're doing at Renaissance is just really phenomenal. And I so appreciate you sending me that liquid,
Yeah,
liquid
thank you, thank you. Well,
encyclopedia.
yeah, well, again, I hopefully other cider makers will take this lead and run with it. And I would love to taste somebody else's stuff
Yeah.
grown in another region. It just I think here it's a lot of flavors. Add all kinds of flavors, and which is fine. It's just a different product. We've got I've got the mango and the you know, over here the different ones and they're good too. So
A cider for every palate, and
that's right.
that's the beauty of it, no doubt. Of course, myself, I just like to have the apple in the glass if I can,
Hmm.
and
Too.
I'm really exciting. It's really exciting to like think of all those like single varietal apples just waiting to be cracked open. So, more to come from Renaissance Orchards, and we'll be, watching and letting everybody know when you go live with your, shipping out. And but for now, check out Vino Shipper, right? And
Oh,
2024, yeah,
and also I press then press. So
press
you
then
can get
press.
yeah
Okay.
I do have some ciders there, and they may even have some leftover Keeve ciders. So
Okay,
I will
good.
be coming out with another Keeve cider in about a year. So,
Very good. Very good. Well, we love Press and Press. Well, Chris, thank you so much for chit-chatting with me today on the Cider Chat and sharing your backstory and kind of bringing us up to snuff on what you're doing. Uh, you know, it's really exciting. It's exciting work, and I think you've really done quite an exemplary
thank you.
deed for the cider community. You really have.
I
It's
appreciate that.
beautiful. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll stay tuned and we'll talk soon then.
Okay. Well, thank you and have a great week.
You too.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.